Greg, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on as the head of relationships at rss.com. And based on your rich career experience, I just can't wait to tap into your brain and get going with this.
Yeah, so much. It's good to always be on the show and talk to you again, and hopefully drop some knowledge with everyone that's going to be listening to this now and in the future.
Have you been on a lot of podcasts recently?
I did one yesterday. I'm kind of always on the hunt to guest. It gives me, I mean, I guess it's a good segue. It gives me a good understanding of how to coach and help host when I'm a guest, going like, "Hey, this is what I've seen, or this is what you're missing, or here's other avenues that hosts are doing that maybe you can go ahead and take advantage of." And give that kind of free little advice just by being a host or being a guest.
Yeah, my most exciting part about this episode was to ask what your feedback was after the fact. That was
Uh,
that was like this was like my this was like my America's Got Talent moment. You know what I mean?
This is so true, and that's what I love doing. It's like, all right, how many people will make the changes, and how many won't? But that's I think in life in general, we're great at giving advice. Sometimes we don't take it, or sometimes it's like great advice, but just finding that time to actually implement what someone tells us to do becomes a harder thing for many of us. I'm sure anyone that's listening, you can all relate.
And for a lot of people too, it's not like the first thing that they're doing. A couple of questions I have relating to that, but it's interesting because like this is usually like a side hustle, or like this is like something people, and then they realize how much actually is involved in it, and then they either have to dive in or step away. But like given the like when I'm looking over, like given the statistics that I gathered, I kind of like based it out of like Canada and the US, given like that is a large proportion of the people listening to podcasts. And what I think, in my knowledge, with over 584 million podcasters listening worldwide as of 2025. What do you think has like what do you think key elements like contributed to bringing it from like 2010 as 12% monthly listeners in the US to in 2024 over 47% of monthly
So
listeners?
I mean, I'm sure someone smarter than me that has the data and the stats can pull out. But I mean, you think about Serial is one of those pinnacle moments when everyone started hearing the true crime podcast Serial and what that did from a listening experience. COVID was another big bump that people saw. Uh, we're all sitting at home. We're all trying to figure out what to do. So people decided to start podcast. Or there was the my entire business is crushed. What do I do? So they started a podcast. So it became the hobby as well as the business as a transition. So there's been a little different inflection points throughout time. Those would be two that I would probably point to. There's like I said, someone's got the data on the more inflection points that are there. But from why podcasting, I mean, it's just a medium that really resonates because you're able to tap into any kind of niche audience that you want. Uh, I know one of the questions we'll ponder, and it's something that everyone talks about, is video. But what's great about podcasting is I don't have to watch. I could take a break. Like every Monday, I post 3 podcasts that I think people should listen to on my LinkedIn. And that whole process started is my day. I wake up, I sit at the computer here for 11 hours or so. I go work out, I eat, and then I'll sit on the couch and we'll binge whatever show we're binging, right? I'm still staring at a screen. I didn't even talk about the time I'm spending looking at my phone. So, how can we give your eyes a break, and how can we start actually giving your brain still what it wants, whether it's entertainment, whether it's education, whether it's a story and a narrative. So there's so much that comes out of the power of just audio without having to add in video, and that's kind of where I see it. So to your question, it's created all these different avenues that someone's able to get in front of an audience without having to do so much work that the video component actually adds to, and we could talk about that.
Um, yeah, I think it's really interesting because like I've kind of I've probably done, I'd say in terms of like what I've tried to like gain my experience on, a lot of it has revolved around videography and not necessarily on audio, which I think has been like a downside where I've had more technical issues where I think would affect the viewer experience more than actually video. Because a lot of people that I talk to, they say they listen on Apple Podcasts or driving to work or something through a commute where, as well as just giving your eyes a break, it's something that people do, I think, as our culture and our society becomes more of a multitasking like society, that people are trying to always do more things at once, where I think that's like another like main contributor of people like digesting content, because being able to multitask, you're able to consume all of this content all day at work, where it kind of never was a thing before, where a lot of people have these jobs where they can put on autopilot. They can throw in, like, how many times do you see like a postal worker and he got the headphones on? Because it's like, I don't have to have interaction with people, so I can just digest whatever, right? So it's very interesting, because it's one of those things where YouTube is becoming one of the more it's becoming like the biggest source of like podcasting, where is that so much having to do with video? So it's kind of like a contradicting thing where it's like, well, the highest platform that's getting the most views is YouTube, but the biggest connection or the way that engages the most audience is through audio. So how do I like maintain that type of balance? And that's kind of what I get into like next, where we discuss like the podcast landscape. Uh, it's it's evident through like stats and through like the engagement I get, that like my audience range is between like you know uh 20 to 40 age range. Based on statistics, it says that 66% of US individuals aged 12 to 34 have listened to a podcast in the last month. Now, given that huge chunk, should content creators tailor their strategy to get there, or should it be based on like a niche that they're passionate about?
It's a great question. I think that's like the $1 million question. And the answer goes back to, what are you trying to create? Right? Are you trying to be everything to everyone? Or are you trying to be what you need to be at that moment? And that becomes the ultimate question. So think about anyone that's listening, think about your own behavior, right? Are you on Instagram, and are you a person who's looking at videos? Are you the person who's only looking at images? Are you doing a mixture of that? So you're now asking a creator to understand, do I have to put in a video here so that I get the engagement, but also that's the content that you want to consume? So it's really trying to understand a behavior, but also what is it that I want to create, and how hard am I going to work to create that. And I think there's a lot of value for anyone that's listening to put that hat on. If you're not sure what a creator goes through to either create a video, create a post, create content in itself, like, there's a lot. And if you add to that the posts that are doing really well versus the posts that you're like, I engage with, but it doesn't get a lot of engagement, maybe that's the quality piece. Maybe they just are trying to be everything to everyone. So it really goes back to, what are you trying to focus on? And we can look at your show as an example. Like, do you want to be everything to everyone? Do you want your show to be, in whatever cases it may be, to all different platforms? Or you're like, you know what? This is my focus and this is what I'm niching down in. My background was, I used to run a listing platform. And so, from that standpoint, I had millions of listeners on our platform. And as I always told every podcaster, I'm like, look, everyone's not going to listen on Apple. Not everyone's going to listen onto X platform. So make sure your show is everywhere. And then I worked for a repurposing platform. So it's like, great. Instead of trying to drive a person to just listen to your show, think about the content you're creating. And is that ability to create it in a way that it could be a newsletter, it can be a blog, so that even if a person doesn't want to listen to your show, they're able to still engage with you? Are we building the know, like, and trust? Or are you going down the path, I'm a media company? And if you're acting as a media company, that means you're making your money by sponsorships and ads. And if that's the case, then you're trying to figure out, how do I game the system? How do I understand all the different algorithms that are out there so that I'm getting the growth I need, so I get the engagements I need, so I'm actually playing the algorithmic game. Therefore, I'm able to make the money with sponsorships and ads. So it really comes down to what's the strategy? Why are you creating content? And I'm a firm believer for a business purpose, it is the greatest podcasting. If you have a business, podcasting is the greatest lever. It's the ability to bring in 52 people into a conversation, whether they are existing clients, so you've got the testimonial side, or it is a prospect that you would love to bring on and you would never have been able to open the door and get that person to respond to a cold email in the first place. Now you're getting them to come on your show. They're promoting you, and you're getting all this content that you're able to promote outside of that. So, long story, but the answer is it really depends what's your strategy in figuring that piece out.
So, one follow up I kind of wanted to add, and something that I thought of like while I was just listening, was this idea of like people that do it for fun. And like for me, it's one of those things of like, given the amount of effort it is, do you think that it like it can be fun for people? Like, I guess it depends on what you look at, but like, is the idea that like eventually I have to make money? Is that something that a lot of podcasters should consider before they get started? Of like,
No.
where does this turn into dollars?
Yes. So that last statement, yes. The first statement, no. Because where does this turn into dollars does not mean sponsorships and advertising. Where
I
it
could get
turns
more
into
business for my
dollars,
flooring company and talking about floors, or
ex- you could go down any path. It could
right,
be
bringing on customers and they talk about how whatever, right? Like, or if I'm
ROI.
yeah, stand up exactly. So it's like, am I trying to get people to a subscription? Am I trying to get people to my Patreon? Am I trying to sell art? Am I trying to sell live shows? Am I a rock band? Whatever the case may be. But it's interesting on how you gauge that buy-in, and like, is there times that you like coaching with people and you kind of say like, oh, I don't think you get it, like you can't do this amount of work and get the thing that you're expecting to get, like if you want this to look like this, you also have to do this, and they're like, but I don't want to do that because I have wife and kids, etc., etc., etc. I don't have the money, blah blah blah, and you kind of have to tell them like, oh well, that's too bad.
It is an acceptance, right? So most people, I mean, you and I connected 'cause, I work for RSS. You host your podcast with RSS. I created a community to bring everyone together, and you start understanding. And one of the questions I love having you guys all answer when you introduce yourself is, "Why did you start podcasting?" And I've gone through and I've aggregated all those answers for people, and it's so interesting because like some of the reason people are doing a podcast is my friend and I are playing a game and we live across the world and we love playing a game and we're always talking about things. So like we should have just put this on a podcast and have other people and like it was just a way to connect. And so are they actually thinking it's a long-term monetization? Is it going anywhere? It created a connection. And sometimes that is a beautiful thing. Like it is work and requires effort and there is money involved in terms of the tools and platforms you're using, but that's like any other hobby where you're like, you know what? You and I could go and play pickleball together is the big craze, but we live 3,000 miles away, so we can't do that. So instead of us playing pickleball, we're going to sit here on a mic for 40 minutes and we're going to talk. And if anyone listens, great. We're going to bring people on. If people want to listen and come a guest, like all of those things are reasons. I coach people on the business side of like, what is the ROI? But the hobby side, accept that. If that is what, and if you're like, I would love to make money on this, then if you want to make money on this, then you actually have to have a better strategy, not from a monetization of ads and sponsorships, but like, where's this going? What could we turn this into? And ultimately, how do we grow this? Because if the only thing is just the two of you talking as you're playing a game, how do you grow that show so that other people would want to listen to that? So it's all about strategy. And I think that's the biggest thing just in life, right, Ryan? Like most of us don't have a strategy. We start something, it sounds great, or we never start it because we're overthinking and the fear of actually doing it becomes a big hurdle. So strategy becomes the biggest thing. But I do have the conversation going like, let's be real, you're not going to make the money you're expecting to. So, how do we make the ROI so that it isn't ads, but there is value?
Or something that I even considered doing was reaching out to like local businesses and saying like, "Hey, I'm doing this podcast. I would love to either have you on as a guest, or I wonder if there's some sort of agreement we can use. Maybe you have a coffee shop, and I'd love to do like a feature episode in this coffee shop. This would be a great way to feature your coffee shop. This would also be a great way for me to gain experience in like collaborations and partnerships and seeing like what that looks in recording remote, right? Because that's something I kind of want to experience in this kind of like how do's like, and not getting too much off topic because I have a lot to talk about, but they're like this idea of like gauging going from like a studio audience to like a live audience and engaging that like ticket monetization as well as like a virtual like episode monetization, but kind of logistically what would that cost me, and like would it ever be worth it, and kind of like who would I have to bring on board in order to like facilitate that and make it like worthwhile for anybody, right? So it's something that I'm looking at, but it's one of those ideas where you kind of have to be like creative and look into it and say like, what am I actually looking to do, right? Like, and what would be the purpose of a live audience? Am I trying to do comedy? Is it trying to like, what am I trying to gauge, right? And then on top of that, like, is it actually making me money? Is this worth it? But going into that, again, something that may or may not be on every podcaster's mind is monetization. And with so many options involved, like so many options today, from Patreon, dynamic ad insertion to affiliate marketing, it's kind of overwhelming. What do you think are the best monetization models in like today's podcasting landscape?
Your business. I mean,
Yeah,
that's what I coach on, right? So let's go into this scenario here. You're going to go to the local coffee place and go. I love how you threw in the example. Like, I don't know what it's like to do a host read ad or advertise and have a sponsor. So like, let me go learn from this guy. But the question I'd push back is, well, is your audience that's listening to your show localized? Because if I was that coffee shop and said, hey, you're going to talk about me, but your audience is global, or your
it's from
audience is
Bangladesh, or they're like, well, it's
hopefully,
not, you know what I
yeah,
mean? But
you
it's
don't
not
know,
worth it to
right?
me.
Exactly. So you always have to think about like who's the right person from a sponsor standpoint, but also who's the right person from a business standpoint. And that goes back to what is the purpose of your show? Why are you doing this? If it is to open the doors, to open conversations, to, as I like to say, know, like, and trust, and build that so that you do get either speaking engagements or it gets a booking deal or whatever it may be thereafter, you got to be thinking about all of those components. I had a conversation before we jumped on here. Um, a lady who's in the she's a stylist, and so her podcast should be engaging with other stylists or fashion people because that is the people that she should be networking with. So her ROI is not of how do I sell sponsors on my show? It is how do I open the door with the people that I want to know so that I can have the relationships with those individuals. That's the ROI. But if your show is not tying that all together, you're missing out on a huge opportunity for your ROI and your growth as a business. So back to your question of Patreon or dynamic ads, it really comes down to what is the purpose you're trying to serve. Why would I would do a live show? If I take back to your case, it's like podcasters, like you and I have no clue who's listening. Like you'll look into the RSS analytics, you can go, I know where they are, but I
Yeah,
don't
but I
know
have
who
no
this person
idea
is.
who the, yeah.
Right? So you do a live audience because you're like, well, I know I've got this chunk of people in this geographic location. I'm going to do a live there. So now I can actually see and meet my people. And now I've got feedback. Now these are one on one relationships that I'm able to create. What do you do with those one on one relationships once you've actually engaged with them? No different than you and I being able to talk and then come on here. It's like, what do we do with this virtual conversation in this relationship? No different than what do you do with a in person one? There's so many things you can do. It's just a matter of how do you want to leverage that. And a lot of people in just business aren't thinking about all those different avenues.
And it's so interesting you say that because I kind of vocalize the same thing to when it just in a different term of like when people say, "Oh man, like why don't you have me on my show?" Like say it's a coworker or whatever, and they kind of have like quote unquote an average life. Like they don't do anything like from what I know, they're just an ordinary person. But I kind of spin it to them of like, yo, we can sit down. You just got to figure out what we could crush out an hour in talking about. It's not necessarily like the it's not necessarily like how affluent you are. It's kind of about like, well, where's your niche, where's your like anchor point of like how we're kind of hitting this discussion. Do you want to talk, do you know a shit ton about basketball? Okay, well then maybe we can I can spit it in basketball for an hour, sure, come on,
But the
like
question becomes, what is the value to you and anyone that's listening to you right now? So if anyone's listening right now, are they tuning in for some guy's conversation about basketball and then my conversation about podcasting and someone else's conversation? It's like, what are you structuring this show
right,
around so that people have that
and
understanding?
and that's again where I find that I hit these like outliers where it's like, okay, that doesn't really make sense, but in my head and how I think about it, um, gaining like local reach is like, oh, if I can attach myself to this person, they might open the door to this guest. And then that might person might open the door to this guest, this guest. So I think the opportunity for me to get a demographic is hindered, but the opportunity for me to gain rent and more like actionable like things through that is like, oh, well then I can like if I can get into kind of a pocket there and gain enough knowledge, but it's kind of like with one reward comes something else and with one benefit comes a disadvantage, and how do you kind of measure that out? But kind of bringing it back, like have you like cuz host reads are like that's what I see the biggest of is host reads. But do you find that like with dynamic ad insertion, like you're going to lose that authenticity?
Um, so I guess it's a good launching off point to understand. Dynamic ad insertion could be a host read ad that is dynamically inserted in there, right? So like you could record an ad for this beverage company, right? And record it before, and you're just going to dynamically insert it into the episode at that point. Versus right now, I just decided to do a live read of this that's different, right? So both of them are you promoting that product. One is doing it live baked into the episode, and one is recording it and then dynamically inserting it in there. So same concept, just different delivery of it. So what you'd be talking about more is programmatic, and the programmatic side is now a McDonald's ad that's coming in here, and it's not you, and it's just a normal 30-second like radio ad that's programmatically inserted into your show. Um, you hear that, right? That's no different than if we go back to like the YouTube piece. It's what the YouTube content is. If I'm watching a TV show, that is what I'm getting from a commercial standpoint. Hopefully it's getting better in terms of the targeting of the ad so it knows who I am, where I'm at, based on my device and all these other pieces. So it's targeting me a little better. But we've all been conditioned to advertising. Like this is the world we live in. And as attention continues to get divested into more and more social platforms, more and more TV platforms and streaming platforms, the ad market, which is where I came from, the ad world, it's still 90% going to Meta and Google as the largest audience of 3 billion people that they both have on their platforms. And then the remaining dollars are trying to trickle in. So from podcasting standpoint, it's a $2 billion industry that people have said. Others have quoted it as a $7 billion, depending on all the different ways you look at it. We're all just trying to get those dollars in there. I'm partly focused with RSS to get the dollars in, and partly
Mm,
how do I help podcasters like yourself or others realize there's so many other ways to make money, which if we look at the $2 billion, that's in advertising. But if I look at the influence of maybe you selling a course, you selling live tickets, all those other revenue streams that you can use podcasting for, or we could go ROI. If you did a show for a year and you had 52 conversations or all these relationships, what door did that open? Maybe it got you a new job because you were strategically positioning how you did that. can I say the revenue that podcasting had was actually your salary? Like all those other components that you can't actually tie to the value of what this medium provides.
And do you think like given that like RSS is a business and what people like think of is like again we'll talk about in our next part is like building relationships, but the idea of like seeing like get seeing listeners as like businesses, right? Like seeing them as I'm sorry, what did you said seeing podcast like the audience as
Dollar
like
signs? Is
yeah, like
that what you're
as
going
like
at?
businesses, yeah. And kind of using that in a way to like anyways you see where like this type of engagement and like relationship like trying to build the relationship and how like the coaching and stuff, it's the idea of like you want to keep us going as podcasters so we still pay for our monthly, right? Like so it's this idea, but it's like it's a proven strategy, right? So it's very like it's not an arguable thing to be like, hey, engagement and trying to like know what's best to do and how to best serve the people using your platform, or even the people that are your audience and engaging in podcasters and stuff like that, is like to find out what you should talk about or who you should be engaging in or what type of things you should be doing. It's kind of like the viewer engagement is something that you know is that can kind of lead into the monetization, right? But wrapping up
Look,
the
hold
sorry,
on. So you're let's go down that path. You're wearing an Oilers jersey. So if anyone that's not watching, you're wearing an Oilers jersey, right? So yeah, there you go. And so that must mean you're a hockey fan. Now, maybe you grew up playing hockey because you're Canadian. So how do you not? But maybe you're not, and maybe it was a hobby, and you're like, I'm never gonna be a McDavid. I'm not gonna put in the time and energy and get there. But that doesn't mean that playing a sport, which we all know statistically, if you play group sports, like the camaraderie, the skills, and all that stuff, like that's no different than you can look at it from podcasting. So for me, my job, well, yes, I would love to have um, more people with RSS podcasting longer because that's a business right out there. Nothing's worse than as a coach going like a player quit too soon because they weren't given the skills, they weren't given the motivation, and they had the potential. My job is how do I help you with take that potential and help you channel it so that you can see the success. You can look at it from a financial standpoint, like, hey, the longer I get you playing, little league or pee
the
wee or
more
whatever
like
it is,
membership fees I get.
yeah, but like if you're good at it, if you enjoy it, if there's ROI that's coming to this, then that's where we all win, and that's where I love about it.
So from a business standpoint, was that something you had to shift gears in your head of like, oh, I'm more about like building this community and like heading these relationships and stuff like that, more as like a how I can kind of earn like, you know what I mean? Kind of putting yourself in a thing of like that's someone else's job. Like the guy in part of like the making the subscriptions and doing that, like that's not my thing. So like I can kind of really focus on what I'm doing here so it doesn't like get jaded. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it's a great point. So, I mean, head of relationships, I believe life is about time and relationships. So, for me, it's when I positioned it, and I worked with the founders here at RSS. It was like, you guys built an amazing product, but we haven't talked to our customers. And if our customers aren't realizing that there's resources inside their account, there's documents that they can go. I'm the first to admit, and this is probably why I pay certain things. If you're like, here's a DIY, I'm not a DIY kind of person. I need you to talk to me and tell me exactly what it is. And I know there's enough of me's out there to realize someone's going to read it, someone's going to watch it, and someone's going to go, Greg, I need to pick up the phone and show me what to do. And so I realized we had two of those buckets down. We're missing that third. And because, I mean, what we've had a month now that the Slack community has been up, the RSS space is up. Just the little comments that everyone's putting in there allows me to go, oh, here's more information for the Ryans of the world, or here's how we can improve the product. So all that feedback becomes cyclical and making the product better, making you better. And at the end of the day, for me, it's all a win win win. Like, how do I empower you? How do I serve you? Because serving you is going to serve your audience. If we can serve anyone that's listening here or anyone that's going to follow along with your content, is going to be knowing Ryan, liking Ryan, engaging with Ryan. Those are all positive things that I get to influence, which is amazing.
Podcasts are sometimes referred to as friendship simulators. What do you think about that statement?
Ooh, I haven't heard that one. Tell me more.
So they say that podcasts are basically referred to as like friendship simulators because of the sense of connection, intimacy that they can feel, but not actually being friends with them. They don't actually. A lot of this relates to like celebrities and stuff. You have Two Bears One Cave, Theo Vaughn, and all of these was kind of real world implications at some point. But yeah, what do you think about that idea of like it's a friendship simulator?
I love it. I One of the reasons I love podcasting is you and I have only met once, and I will have whatever intimate conversation, truth, like who I am and who I show up is who you will meet in the real life. Like that is me to a T. And you can have those that join, and you're like, is this person authentic? Like, and feel like they're selling me whatever. Like your gut can kind of feel that. So for me, it is that's similar, where it's like you know this person because they're authentic, they're sharing their deepest. You have to be vulnerable. You are a public face in a sense. Today, maybe only 500 people listening. Who knows where this show takes you if you consistently do it? No one knows, but we all know a stupid post from 2010, once a person's really big, comes out and you're like, you said this. It's like, you guys, that was like 15 years ago. I was a kid. Who knows? Right. So, like, you start creating that relationship, and then when you bring in the people that are following you, yeah, they're like, I like this guy's voice, I like the way they talk, I see myself in them, I see a mirror. And so it truly becomes that friendship where, like, I follow Ryan because I like to listen to what he has to say, or the guests he brings on, or I see myself in him, or I wish I was him. I think Ryan's so cool, right? So, like, it creates that entire environment. And that's what's so special about, like, A, social media, and B, just podcasting as a whole, because you have this voice, this potentially faceless person.
Um, Kind of a two-party question, I think. And what I'm going to say is kind of redundant because I don't actually believe it. And when I say real world, I don't mean that podcasting is not a real world, but
Okay.
this is the only way I can like separate the two realities. But do you find through your experience in podcasting or even just like communicating with the cuz I don't even necessarily like resonate with saying podcasting. I say even just like my connections with people has like translated into like real world like successes where I've had like better success in like dealing with confrontation, or I've had more like patience, or I've known when to like shut up, right? Like do you feel like that through your experience with just like the medium of podcasting that there has been like real world implications for you?
Oh my God, 100%. So I'm speaking um, in July of 2025 at a conference for higher education. And one of the things I'm speaking about is how every educational unit, so we're looking at professors, the departments, and the students, should all have a podcast. And the reason, if we want to look at it from student standpoint, is let's say you and I, Ryan, are students right now. We're all trying to enter this crazy world of the job market. We both did the same business major. We took the same classes and everything. Theoretically, on paper, we're apples to apples. But you started a podcast and I didn't. So now you have this entire medium that has helped you understand guest booking processes. Um, Hopefully, you're a better communicator because, as your point, you have to listen. You have to understand, how do I ask these people questions? Now, if you went to a job interview and you're like, I have a podcast, and this podcast has not taught me how to communicate, how to listen, how to understand different types of people that I have to engage with. Your maturity level, I would hope, is far higher than mine without having that skill set, because I'm not practicing. I'm practicing those things with friends and conversations, but you're actually doing it from a completely different realm. So take that just as a theory and now use it as an application for myself in the same regards completely.
Yeah, it's something that even through this last year, I was like, oh, I'm starting to see how this like translates outside of it, and even like how the progression from episode to episode to episode, and you look at it and go like, holy shit, like, okay, like I'm starting to be able to slow it down and be like, yeah, shouldn't have cut them off there, yeah, shouldn't have did this. And even the difference between like on a set and through virtual, because like between me and you there's a little bit of like a half second hiccup. So if I cut you off, you're going to be halfway through your sentence before I cut you off, and now it's like bleh, 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 right. So it's one of those things where you just start to tune in, and even just the idea of like what I started to understand through doing it like in person was like people's body language and stuff, and knowing when like you might be possibly making someone uncomfortable when their time is up, right? When they're like, okay, they're out of questions, they're exhausted, they're kind of so it's very interesting because then when I'm having discussions with people outside of like podcasting in my real life, I go like, oh, I think I'm annoying this person with this topic. Like I should probably, or like they don't really seem to be entertained at all. Um,
But you
but
could also, I mean, from that whole standpoint, like it goes into communication skills. You can actually now start going like, how did that question sit with you? And like anyone that's listening right now will be like, you're right. You're breaking the fourth wall in some regards, but you're also bringing in an audience and going, how did that, you're asking them how that question sit with them is no different than how you're sitting asking the question that it sits with me as a guest. And so from a communication standpoint, that's why I say whether you're a hobbyist or you're looking at it from an ROI business, the ROI of just starting a podcast is well worth it in all that you can do because it's teaching you so many different skill sets that will help you just in overall life.
um I kind of want to also dive into like some of the technical aspects of like this building relationships because I think it has a lot to do with the the first thing I want to talk about, and I have it on my mind. I'm gonna kind of shift here, but the idea of like ideal podcast length. What do you think? Like, where do you think that stands with you? Like, if I'm having like conversations with people, how like what should be my timeline?
Everyone that's listening, I want you to go ahead and write Ryan and go, Ryan, I only give you 40 minutes. Or, Ryan, I love listening to you. I could listen to you for hours. That's actually the answer to your question. I mean,
Right.
average, they say, is 38 minutes. So that's the average time. But I know people that do 7 minute shows and they're solos. They do 7 minute shows and they're quick little one question kind of responses. You've got someone who's like a Huberman or Joe Rogan. Hey, they could always talk and their guests are big, but like they're doing 2 to 4 hours and people are
Yeah.
tuning in for it, right? Mel Robbins, I think, number one podcast, she's had, I think, like an hour, maybe 40 minutes, but like it really comes down to what am I trying to accomplish in this show? What is the value I want to give to my audience? And what kind of attention span is the audience I know I'm working with have? And the
Right.
last one is it's okay if your show is an hour and a half and you're then cutting that into small little snippets and you're like, great, I don't need everyone to listen to the hour and a half. I'm going to give you these little bite-sized chunks. So maybe at the end of your show you did, here's the rapid fire questions, and you just turn that rapid fire question into a short little reel. And you're like, I don't care if anyone watches the other hour, I'm only doing the reel. And then your question then is, how do I monetize just that reel? It's
Right.
engagement. It is people know, liking, trusting you. But it then goes back to what is my ROI? If you're just focused on ads and monetization with sponsorships, completely different. But if you're like,
Yeah.
I just need more people to know about me. So if I talk for an hour and a half and not everyone listens to me for an hour and a half, but they follow my blog, my newsletters, and everything else, then you're golden, right?
Right. Um, Another thing that I want to talk about is like relationships between like podcasters and brands. Has there ever have you ever had like a story that you could possibly share today about like a time or experience that you had that was like a game changer for like you being involved in like podcasting or something you saw as a bystander? How did that like I kind of just want to bring out this idea like the power of collaboration, right? And how that can kind of like depending on what it is, it can kind of be a leap pad for some people.
I mean, the first one that comes to mind, and it's only because I saw their LinkedIn. There's a brand named Neuro. It's a gum and a mint that I knew the founders, met them when I was working in another job at a WeWork, and they just started a WeWork. What is this, 2017? So now we're 2025. Joe Rogan featured their stuff authentically, like just
Yeah,
happened to have it. Product blew up. Now they're taking that and going, look, Joe Rogan talked about us. CVS is carrying them, and their brand, like just watching these two guys continue to, because they did all this science on what they built and how instead of taking an energy drink, we could turn that into a mint or a gum and give you the same kind of energy. So like that is a story that I wasn't involved in, but knowing the founders and seeing that story just authentically show up because Joe Rogan talked about it and his audience, you're like, this is amazing. So you see that
yeah,
stuff all the time where creators love a brand and they just authentically talk about it. And the next thing you know, that brand starts blowing up, um, or the brand then reaches out to them, or they now use that as the catalyst to reach out to the brand or the marketer. All those things happen all the time, which is why I tell people if you're so focused on advertising as a dollar, as a medium of how to make money, start practicing just talking about brands you like. They may not be paying you,
but it's
but
good practice.
A, it's good practice. B, you're able to turn that into a, hey, brand X, this is how I spoke about brand Y. This is what it looks like. You should now advertise with me because this is what I'm able to do. Or
Yeah,
you once again have no clue, take that clip and send it to the brand themselves. It's like, I love your product. I talk about this. I would love for you to sponsor my show. Or can you give me some product because I'm going to talk about you anyways?
yeah.
But right? So like
Eh,
there's so many different ways you can work it.
I also want to like with building relationships and like the dynamics of podcasting, there is like a personal toll with content creation, as well as like the one thing that I was thinking about previously the last few minutes ago was this idea of like where do you think like the level of like criticism versus like forgiveness for yourself, of like how hypercritical should I be, and how much is this a 5 year thing, how much is this a 3 year thing, how much is this 100th episode, 200th episode, or how much of this is like, hey, you really need to get better at your monologues, this is something that needs to change next episode. Whereas like we want to get someone to pay for our cameras, well that might be a 5 year plan, right? And how much criticism should a myself as a podcaster or anybody listening, how much leeway should you give yourself for that amount of criticism?
It's an interesting question the way you phrase it. And the way I think about it is you have a lot of people who are like, I want to spend $1,000 on a mic and the setup and everything else, and they haven't even hit record yet. Now, if that is a mindset of I'm going into this as a media brand and I need to have make sure that my production is of quality, then great. If you're like, I just want to hit record, it's okay if I've got the $50 mic, $50 headphones, and I'm going to work towards it. And I know I'm going to start honing my craft so I can get there because the investment of $1,000 up front when I haven't even hit record, I don't know if I'm good. I don't know if I'm a good host. I don't know if I can get good guests. Like all those factors should come into it. And the criticism of everyone says I'm a good speaker, everyone says I ask good questions. That may be true, but when you're actually on a mic and you're now having an audience listen to, use it from a joke standpoint. Person who's the funny kid in your group, put him up on stage in front of an audience and try and rehearse a
And
joke.
people.
Completely different, right?
Yeah,
That is once again, I can tell jokes with my friends and be natural in there, but putting me on a stage, completely different. So how hard are you working towards refining your craft? And if that's the goal, which it should be, you should always be thinking about how do I be a better speaker? How do I be a better host? How do I ask the better questions? How do I frame my show so that the pacing is efficient, so that my listener doesn't get lost, they get the value they need, and they go, wow, I love this. This was not only entertaining, this was educational, whatever the case may be. So the criticism really comes down to, why are you doing this? How hard are you working on it? But you should have that long term goal. This should be something that you're working towards, not as a, you know what, this is just not worth the ROI, or this isn't worth the investment of putting into it. If that's the shrug your shoulder, I tried it, gave it my good 1-2, probably may not have given it your best 1-2. You probably treated it as a standalone business and you didn't see the ROI because you were blinded by what is the actual ROI. Going back to our communication skills, our interview skills, our process setup, just using technology to help us. Those are all incredible skills that, even if you're like, Greg, when am I ever going to learn how to use, or when will I ever have to edit a podcast for my day job? Knowing your day job, you probably wouldn't have to do that. But hey,
No.
who knows if your day job decided one day we want to have a podcast, or something else came in there and it's like, you know what, we need some marketing or we need X, Y, and Z. You now have a skill set that no one else had. Goes back to the you and us as two students going like we're apples to apples. We now have different skill sets in the world we currently live in, especially with AI doing what it's doing. We should all be skilling up.
So, and that's interesting because kind of what I got from that was like it's all kind of relative. Like it depends on who you are, it depends on what your task is. But here's another way I would like to phrase it: is like, what would be like the voice gate of like, okay, is there a threshold of like, okay, if the voice sucks, the question sucks, this sucks, like, because one of the statistics that I wanted to bring forward was 82% of all podcasts like on directories such as like Apple Podcasts and Spotify are inactive,
Yeah,
right?
right.
So it's one of those things where you just say like, when do you kind of say like, I think you're wasting your time, like, and like I'll give you like a very broad analogy of like, okay, the threshold for failure as a heart surgeon is probably a very very like low percentage, right? Whereas like you bring it down the line and like a laborer's like, what, like the errors that are going to happen, but it's like, okay, well, how much do you have a guy that like knows nothing and now like he's spreading misinformation and now like he's just like a shithead online, and like I get that there's free speech and everything, but how much of like, okay, this is actually like bad for what we're trying to do now, like this is actually like, it's so bad now that it's inaccurate, or it's like, you know what I mean, it's kind of like vulgar or too, you know what I mean, crass,
If no one's listening to that person,
then it doesn't matter.
then well, no, that's your gauge. They can go out there. I'm gonna say all the vulgar things. Gonna say whatever it is that you just described of that kind of person. And if no one's listening, then they're just talking to the void, and no one cares what they have to say. If other people, and he starts building an audience, or she starts building an audience, well, then there's enough people that are like, I believe what this guy says, or this is exactly
And then
my
it's
kind of
all like,
person,
oh yeah, yeah,
right? So
it's
like, that's the joys of 8 billion people. We all have a voice. We all have who we gravitate towards, and social media and podcasting and content as a whole gives you a place to, I want to find my people, and my people don't have to be in this block radius. They can be around the world, and who's going to gravitate towards that?
right. um Going into like the future of podcasting, because I think there's a lot of uh things that are on the horizon or in like very close future that are coming, but what type of innovations do you see for like the podcasting future?
Um, right now, my wish list from an innovation standpoint is we make discoverability a better feature.
Right.
That, so anyone that's listening, you probably have the same frustration that us in the industry have, is finding a podcast is incredibly difficult, which is why a lot of it is being pushed towards YouTube, because YouTube's backed by Google as the second largest search engine. They've done an incredible job as a search discovery feature, just as a whole,
Well,
regardless of just podcasting.
and a quick stat: 30% of all traffic to new podcast is via algorithm and AI generated search processes. So it's something that it's, you know what I mean? It's starting to get better at allowing the new cream rising to the top.
So it's interesting. If you look at Meta, whose business is in advertising, you take Google, whose business is in advertising, their jobs is the amount of money they've spent on technology for algorithmic surfacing of content and what content will feed you because of what you like and click and so forth. The podcast search engines, Apple and all the other listing platforms have done a terrible job on being able to help the discoverability. If I typed in I've done this as an example. I run community, right, for RSS. So if I want to go listen to community podcasts that are going to teach me how do I do a better job running a community, I typed in community. What ends up showing up in most podcast players is church community podcast, and I'm like, that's not really what I'm going for. So it's got to get better in that regards. But I think from where is podcasting going, a lot of it is everyone's fighting for the video first because of the discoverability. But I'm still going to be a not a purist in the sense, but like not everyone will do video. Not everyone should do video, and there's no reason to make everything video. I know all the platforms are fighting for video, therefore you're fighting for attention, but everything's cyclical. I think the younger generation right now is all fighting because they're like, I want flip phones. They want basic phones, stuff that I at least grew up with because there was
People
no
have too
other.
much information.
There's just too much of engagement with your phone. So it's like let's make it easier in that regard. So you will see everything will become cyclical, which is why I truly believe if you want to fight the algorithms, then you're going to focus on video right now, and that's where we're going to go for the next few years. If you want to just focus on how do I create good content, have good conversations, create the ROI that I want without having to become a media company and focus on the growth of my show with social media, then you're able to do that as well. Analytics will be a big one, but that's always. I've been in media for 20 years here, and it's always like, this is the year of mobile or this is the year of video. Been in this space long enough. Attribution, and that is the concept of like, how do I know where a person clicked and converted, or if I saw this brand ad and then I bought this product, did that brand ad convert me? Was it the Google search thereafter? Like, where is the attribution to say this ad was successful? Most of the time you're looking at is the last click. And so it's how do I tie that all together? And so podcasting becomes another piece where it's like, how did we know where someone listened to this show? Did they find me on a Instagram ad? Did they find me in this way? So all that will be uh, um, be a charted that we will have to figure out, but that's just media as a whole, which is
Right.
really interesting.
Yeah, it's going to be a wild road. I've even over the last year, like I've seen that things have changed just drastically. Even like halfway through my podcasting journey, they were like, "Hey, we're changing how the shorts views are kind of taken in," and or like you apply for certain things through like ads or whatever it is, and they're like, "Oh, nope, sorry, you need this," or you're, you know what I mean? You're trying to chase milestones and stuff, but you're also like finding out like when can I get into these pockets to kind of really like, because I've seen that there's been moments of like miniature growth and then like exponential growth. And I'm like, how do I recreate that? What do I need to do to recreate that? But before we let you go, just a quick, fun, rapid fire. I think this is good for kind of ending off the thing and, you know, putting a nice little bow on it. Go to comfort food.
Um, Mac and cheese.
Mac and cheese. Great. Breadcrumbs or no breadcrumbs?
I guess Stouffer's doesn't put it on. Yeah, I guess no breadcrumbs.
No breadcrumbs. Fair enough.
But you got to have like the crispy cheese on top.
Yeah. Yeah. Facts. What's one podcast trend you personally see as overrated or likely to fade away?
Oh, fade away. I mean, overrated is just focusing on monetization as a whole. Is that
Yeah.
going to fade away? No, but
No.
that is one that bugs me the most because, as I've said through this last hour, the ROI of podcasting is so much more than just sponsorships and ads.
If you had to pick one podcasting tool or software other than RSS.com, what would it be?
I mean, I'm biased once again. I'll go with my former company, Cast Magic. So,
Yeah.
AI
Perfect.
content repurposing tool. That's how all my LinkedIn content is. But I use it far more than just podcasting. It is literally the lifeblood of just so much I do.
Fair enough. And you've built a career around connection. If you could have dinner with any podcaster, who would you choose and why?
Um, oh, you gave me this question, and I had an answer. Now I'm blanking on. I guess I'll go with because I listened to her. I'll just go with Mel Robbins.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, she's my number one go-to podcast for the most part. So sure, might as well, but probably a terrible answer. I just can't remember the main one I had.
No, that's okay. I always find that like people's inspiration is based on who they enjoy like digesting, right? So is that the same with that? Like because you find that like the whether the content is like for you or whether it's like mine is Theo Vaughn because I was like, oh, I closely resonate with how he like talks to people and he's a little bit like edgy, right? Where I was like, oh, I kind of follow the same trend.
Like I could say like Steve Bartlett, who's now I'm based in Los Angeles. Steve now lives here. He's the Diary of CEO. Like that'd be great. But at the same time, like, what am I gonna talk about with him? Like I feel like I would just want to be like raw, but everyone's like, you don't listen to his show enough to know. But Mel, I went to USC, and I know her daughters went there, so part of that is just a connection. So like there feels like more of a connection that I could have with a conversation with her, even though I
Right.
would love to have one with Steve.
Right. Well, that wraps up another enlightening episode of Solo Spotlight. A heartfelt thank you to Greg Wasserman. Wasserman?
Wasserman, yep.
Correct. Wasserman, head of relationships, RSS.com. Thank you for sharing all of your insights into the podcasting world, um, creating content to building authentic relationships. You gave us a roadmap like podcasters like me and anybody listening. And in the heart of true collaboration, I'm excited to share with the audience that we are partnered with RSS.com as an affiliate. If you're inspired to launch or grow your own podcast, RSS.com is the platform we trust for reliable hosting and analytics and distribution. Use our exclusive affiliate link in the episode description to sign up. Doing so supports Solo Spotlight as well as Spare Bedroom Studios while helping you access RSS.com outstanding tools and resources. If today's conversation resonated with you, consider subscribing to Solo Spotlight. Staying connected with social media, exclusive content, more inspiring stories. Until next time. And podcasting isn't about the stories we tell, it's also about the connections, and collaborations we make along the way. And with that, thank you very much, Greg.